Hi guys, welcome back to the next episode of Don't Fear the Wait with me, your tiny Titan host. I'm getting smaller by the day. I just keep on saying tiny that many times that I think I am visibly shrinking. Either that or my hair is just getting a little bit different in color, which I don't like this one. I don't like the purple hair. What do you think, Phil?
You did say it was going to be blue. I
Yeah,
think
well, it's
blue
got
would be better.
it's. I don't know if you can see it because of my dingy lighting. It has got some blue tinge into it, but I don't know. It's just not me. It just isn't me, I don't
Go full
think.
blue.
I'm going to have to change it. But anyway, so welcome back to the next episode of Don't Fear the Wait. It's been a while. However, I've been exceedingly busy with all of my athletes and things. And I thought to myself, do you know what? I was going to do a solo podcast, but then I thought about Phil and I thought, you know what? We can get Phil on. Basically, because he's got a cool last name. And I think it would be cool to have somebody with a cool last name on, because nobody can ever really realistically say my name. So I'm going to bring you onto it just because people don't know how to say your name. So anyway,
Can I guess how to say your name?
you can.
But is it Italian or something?
No.
Oh, where is it from?
Serbia.
Mirzeta.
Close.
Ah,
But no. So the correct pronunciation of it is Miriceta.
okay. I got the ch sound from the C, so
You did.
that's
But
close.
yeah, that's the correct pronunciation. But everybody over here in the UK just says Masita, which is still a lot better than what I do get called. But anyway, I'm going to blame my husband for that because it's his last name. So I just kind of like adopted it. But anyway, right, Phil, you introduce yourself. You tell all the people who you are and all of the rest of it, and then we'll get on to the subject at hand.
Awesome. So I'm Phil Soumakis. I'm also a coach and a competitive bodybuilder, an average one at best, and I have quite a unique approach, let's say, to some things, maybe a bit outside the norm, which is what got me talking to Vicky originally because she was a bit interested. So hopefully I can go over some of that today.
A bit interested. Yeah, it's just kind of some of those things. I thought you were a bit fucking weird, to be perfectly honest. And that's why I was like, actually, do you know what? That's kind of a weird approach. Let's have a chat about that on the podcast. Okay, so yeah, cool. So you are an online bodybuilding coach, correct?
Yes.
And it's only bodybuilding that you coach.
Mainly, it's about an even split between sort of general population and bodybuilding. General population, it's still mainly tailored towards people who are quite motivated, let's say, in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get on well with the whole lifestyle super flexible approach. It just doesn't interest me quite as much. So.
Fair enough. Well, you've got to be honest, don't you? So that's fair dues. Right, okay, so I thought what we would talk about today is your specific approach, which is kind of in line to what I agree with, but you actually go a little bit further into it in terms of high protein approaches for bodybuilders and nutrient partitioning in terms of body composition. So first off, let's get into the scientific nuance about what is optimal and what does the science say in terms of the most adequate amount of protein intake per pound of body weight. So what do we know about that first?
So this is probably one of the most heavily debated topics in bodybuilding in general. There's so many opposing arguments. The 1 gram per pound of body weight has kind of come back into fashion. I see a lot of people doing that. I don't agree with it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it. I did it years ago and I looked worse than I do when I do high protein. And that's purely because people are scared that you can't absorb over a certain amount of protein. That seems to be the general case. And I understand where it's come from. It's the studies that people quote when they're trying to support why they do 1 gram per pound of body weight is often based on subjects who are fasted.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't eaten in hours, and because they just care about the protein in the study, they'll use something like a whey isolate, which will digest very, very quickly. So yes, you take someone that's in a fasted state who hasn't got anything else in the stomach, doesn't have anything else alongside the protein to maybe slow it down or provide an alternative source of energy. A large portion of that is going to be converted into carbs because there's an absence.
Mm.
But when you do have other energy. When you've got, let's say, an abundance of carbs, why is your body going to waste its energy converting protein into carbs when protein is far more vital for physiological function? And the argument is, there's 18 out of 20 amino acids can be converted into carbs for this, but we need protein to produce hormones, to produce every cell in our body needs protein. Protein comes from proteili, meaning the primary building block, essentially, in Greek. So why is your body going to waste that?
Especially if it's got free floating glucose in your body and glycogen stores anyway.
Exactly. So I think that's where some of the confusion comes around that, where people were saying you can't absorb any more than like 35 grams or something at a time. For me, it's just common sense. First of all, anecdotally, I have looked way better on high protein. Everyone else that I've coached has looked way better on high protein. There's limitations, of course. Some people just can't handle that much protein, but you can build up to it. So I had one client who he was about 100 kilos and he was on about 260 of protein when he started with me. We built it up to a point where he's comfortably on 380, and that's comfortable for him. That goes down the tree. He doesn't struggle with that, and he looks so much better at that amount. And there's more and more studies coming out constantly. Again, there's studies to support every side of the argument in whatever topic. You can always find something that supports what you say, but recent ones, at least, well, recent, say like 2013 onwards, are showing now that there's no maximal anabolic response essentially in protein in a meal. There's no ceiling effect. It's not, oh, I've had 40 grams of protein, so that's it. That's the, it doesn't get any better than that. Anything more than that now is just detrimental or just gets wasted. You absorb every single gram of protein and there's a response from your body on that. In my eyes, the daily recommended amounts for just your average day person should be 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight. This even for like my grandma sat at home or something, regardless of what they do, 0.8 to me is the minimal amount you should be having just to support your overall function. And this whole theory hasn't just suddenly come from me. I'm not some sort of genius that's just read through everything and made it up. It's come from people a lot more experienced than me as well. Like Milos Sarcev's a big one. Milos Sarcev's known for being very extreme in certain things, but his overall philosophy and his overall understanding of nutrition and physiology is absolutely incredible compared to what most people may assume it is. And even looking back at athletes that he's worked with or athletes he knows, like Nasser Sombati was a prime example of this. He did 1 gram per pound for years, and then suddenly Milos convinced him to do 2 grams per pound, and he made the biggest change in his entire career in one off season. So I don't know, I could go on about protein forever, but for me, I've always been a high protein kind of guy. It's got an effect on everything. You can use more carbs when you've got high protein as well. I don't know, overall for me, it's just my preferred way of working.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if we just look into the basic physiologies of, like you were saying, about protein consumption, it does have to come down to a basic understanding of physiology. I mean, these coaches who literally have protein ceilings for men and women, depending on certain classes that they go into, I think are just fucking stupid, to be perfectly honest with you. It's like I did actually see on Twitter, I think it was, I can't remember the name of the coach, but he literally just said, oh, I'll never go over 150 grams of protein for a bikini athlete. And it's like, but realistically, you're leaving muscle gains on the table at that point, because if you can have and absorb, or if you can consume comfortably more protein, then have more protein, because basic physiology does do that. It is the primary builder of muscle building at the end of the day. And the amino acids that protein obviously contains, because that's what protein is, can only get stored in muscle tissue. It doesn't get stored anywhere else. And the amount of studies that are coming out in terms of protein overfeeding now, I mean, I've had this conversation on 1,000 different bloody podcasts, that protein overfeeding has stated it is the one macronutrient that you can overconsume and it will not have a negative effect on your body weight or your body composition. It actually has the opposite effect. So in terms of getting in more protein, if you can stomach more protein, then you can do. Now, what is your opinion in case of, and I just wanted to obviously put it out there as well, when you're talking about higher protein intakes, you're not talking about just high protein intake. This is high protein with a moderate amount of carbohydrates and a decent amount of fat, again, for physiological function.
Yeah, so my general approach would be, I don't like high fats. I don't like fats being the main primary energy source. Your body's made to store fats. It's very efficient at it. Why would you want to risk overconsumption of fats? Just you don't need a lot just to get your basic requirements out of it. If you've got good full spectrum fat sources, I would do 0.5 gram per kilo. Would be fine for the majority of people, going up to maybe 1 gram.
Yeah.
Again, different people can respond differently. If you're working with someone who you can generally tell they metabolize fats very well, fine, maybe go higher. But generally, that's roughly where it'd be. And it's not great to just use, a mathematical equation or just numbers to figure things out. But if you take across averages, yes, there's always going to be outliers, but it gives you a good baseline to start off with. Now, if someone's saying, I'm feeling tired, or they've got issues with their skin, or I don't know, their recovery just not quite as good, or they're not getting quite as full when they're eating carbs, like their muscles aren't quite getting as full. Yes, you could say, okay, maybe they need a little bit more fats.
Yeah.
Fine. Because fats they obviously make up the cell membrane of the muscle. They support osmotic, they support nutrients passing in and out the cell membrane if you've got a healthy cell membrane. So generally speaking, that's why I'd go for that. It's about 0.5 gram to 1 gram per kilo. Then, like I said, protein, depending on what the person can stomach, I would start at about 1.5 grams. Some people, you might have to keep it there. Generally, if you get to a point where carbs are very high, you can lower protein.
Yeah.
But most people can't handle that amount of carbs that would require less protein.
Yeah.
They just can't. It's a big strain on your body. If you've got to a point where you've really built up to it over a long period of time, great. But so the fats at that point, like 0.5 gram to 1 gram, and then protein about 1.5 grams would be sort of ideal. Carbs probably be an average of maybe 3 grams per kilo, maybe up to 5 to start with, before you've figured everything else out. And again, I would structure that mainly around training carbs. That would be everything combined. That would be a good starting point.
Yeah.
Like I said, there's outliers in this. So, just to say, oh, no one can go over 150 grams. Why?
Yeah.
Why not? It's, again, with carbs, there's some people I coach and I just sort of look at their diet and I'm like, how is this working? Like, how are you managing this food? Like, this guy I'm doing coaching now for Classic, the amount of food this kid can stomach is ridiculous. The amount of carbs he'll be on over 1,000 grams of carbs easily, and he can stomach all of it. The average person at his weight, no, it's just not going to happen. So yes, there's outliers, but as an average, that's kind of where I would put the macros for the majority of people.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I call these, you always see really, really well-known, very good, well-established bodybuilders, and they always talk about their protein intake. But then you'll see Instagram coaches and they'll always talk about their carb intake. And it's either like one or the other in terms of the camp. And I really find it interesting. So, I mean, if you have a look at like Kai Green, for example, he was on over 700 grams of protein a day. And he did not have a high amount of carbohydrates in it because he just didn't function very well on it. And the amount of carbohydrates that I see some people go on these days, purely for the simple fact that it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's almost like a big, it's
cool.
Almost like clickbait, isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
but I think people think it's cool if you're on high carbs. Look how many carbs I'm on. Like, okay, fair enough. If you don't look good though.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't really matter, doesn't it? And I mean, carbohydrate is the one thing that is going to spike your insulin level. which is going to put your pancreas under a hell of a lot of strain. And this is the reason why people who, unfortunately, that if they're a non-assisted athlete, if they're just a natural athlete, they just kind of disregard their blood glucose levels. And I think that that's a really silly thing to do. I think that they should actually really take care of their blood glucose levels, especially if they are going to be looking at pushing carbs high in an off season. And not actually keeping protein, at a moderate level or whatever like that. So yeah, it's an interesting one really, because you've either got these high protein campers with nothing else, or you've got high fat, which is the keto approach, which is just like, no, stop it. Or you've got the really high carb approach, which is all of the fun of Instagram these days, and saying like, oh, look how many carbs I want, But it can cause so many different issues, can't it, with spiking your insulin all the way through the day, and especially when you are not in need of it. So this was the next part of the conversation that we were going to have in terms of nutrient partitioning. So when you actually need a certain amount of energy, that's when you would predominantly place the energy sources that are very, very quick, which are going to be your carbohydrate. So you talk a little bit more about that, because otherwise I'll just kind of go blah, blah, and then it's pointless you being on.
So yes, I'm a big believer in having things when your body needs it. If you have, the common thing is, I see a lot, is you get some macros together, you just divide it by 6, and that's 6 meals done. And then you just stick some random protein sources and some different carbs, and then, you're good to go. There's your diet. But the reason I don't like this, talking about blood glucose, when you eat any food, it goes into your stomach and your blood glucose starts to rise. There's like a balanced meal. Let's just take some just random balanced meal into it, like a spaghetti bolognese. Let's just say we're in spaghetti bolognese. Whilst our blood sugar's high, our stomach won't necessarily just empty. When your blood sugar starts to lower, that's when your stomach's emptying, your gastric emptying, and then it goes into the small intestine, and then depending on what the food source is, other like pancreatic enzymes may be released, like trypsin or pepsin or something to break it down further into their free form nutrients and be absorbed. If every single meal is going to raise your blood sugar to a high extent and you are trying to push food, what you will end up with, unless you've got some ridiculous metabolism, is your blood sugars, let's say, start here in the morning. After a few meals, they're up here. They drop to here, then they go here, drop to here. So you get like a compounding effect towards the end of the day, because you aren't resetting. Your blood sugars aren't going back far enough. So every meal you put in, you're putting it on top of another meal. So you basically, it's a great way to just ruin your insulin sensitivity and just get fat in the off season.
Yeah.
I don't get fat in the off season. People I coach don't get fat in the off season, because you need to we take that into account. Not every single meal needs to be one that, skyrockets your insulin. So that's why I'm such a big fan of, at least to start out, having carbs just around the workout when you actually need it. And then the other meals are kind of almost maintenance, if you like. It's got some fats in there that you need. It's got your protein. Depending on how fast you expend energy, what your energy expenditure is like, if you've got a manual job, if, I don't know, you just sit at a desk all day, you may have some carbs in the other meals as well, like small amounts, just to keep you topped up. Because ideally what you want is obviously going into your workout to have enough glycogen, you want to have enough energy. If you're burning through energy too much and you're depleting it slowly throughout the day and then trying to fill it up just before you work out, you won't be able to fill up enough to go into your workout. So it does depend on the individual, but ideally you'd have the vast majority just around training. So keep your insulin sensitivity up. If from a composition standpoint, you get to the point where earlier on in the day, and this comes back to the other thing, you can't burn fat and build muscle at the same time. Well, technically at the exact time, no, you can't. In the day, yes. In the whole week, yes, you can. And you don't have to be assisted. You can be natural. I've done it with natural athletes. It works. It's, yes, you can do it to a certain extent. So generally you find that you get to a certain point and you're lean, and then that's kind of where your body fat just stays. You won't really get any leaner than that. But it means afterwards, when you keep pushing food, you don't get fat essentially, unless you're way over egging how much you're putting in there. Lost my train of thought, but yes, so that's that's essentially why I'm a big fan of that. If you give your body everything it needs when it needs it, happy days.
Okay. And then if we have a look at, I mean, like, let's just stay on the subject of bodybuilding realistically, because performance nutrition is completely different to bodybuilding nutrition. So I will structure my diets for my performance athletes very, very different, because my performance athletes do not need to look like bodybuilders. So realistically, you know, they don't need to have abs, but they do need to be very fucking strong and very fucking powerful. So it is completely different from that sort of derivative. But if we stay on with bodybuilding aesthetics, one of the biggest things that people really, really love is that teeny tiny waists and big, huge delts. Now, how is it in terms of like the losing fat and the building muscle at the same time? How can you shrink the waist but grow the delts and the back simultaneously?
So it goes back to what I was just talking about now, like gastric empty and how long food spends in your stomach, what your blood glucose is doing. If every single meal is the same size and you're trying to put in a lot of foods, every meal is pretty big, let's just say. If you've got meals that are smaller because they're maintenance meals, if you like, you go throughout the day with. So that's why a lot of people, when they start on, when I put a diet together for them, they typically find that if they're training in the evening, earlier on in the day, they're fairly hungry because the meals are fairly small. Think about how dense fat is, and realistically, to get enough protein in a single meal, they're pretty small meals. You can have a bit of you'll have some like veg and stuff in there, but your stomach is not going to be inflamed during that period of time. It doesn't have a lot of food it needs to get through. It's very quick and easy. The food goes down easily, right? And then around your workouts, when you've had, all this food, first of all, you're going to digest it way quicker because it hasn't been under stress the rest of the day. But also, I'll touch on another point that goes more towards assisted athletes in terms of keeping a small waist and getting big delts. But again, now you're going into a workout with your blood saturated with energy, and then during your workout, you can add like an intra workout carbohydrate source again, which there's different ones you can pick from, but they digest extremely fast. Even in a workout where you've got up to 60% of your blood in your muscles rather than 15% like you would normally have at resting, even at that point, for me personally, maltodextrin, if I drink some, that will have an effect on my blood sugar in 5 minutes, even though I'm doing physical exercise. So again, a carb source intra workout again is a way to get even more in and make sure you're just full, you've got the energy there necessary. And then immediately after, when you're hopefully by this point, your body should be receptive again in terms of ready to eat. So it's a combination of your blood sugar being low. If you end a workout and your blood sugar is really high, chances are you're having a little bit too much intra workouts, or you simply just need to wait a little bit until it goes down, basically. And then there's the other effects as well on your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system that will also have an effect on blood sugar, but it will also have an effect in terms of when you're actually ready to eat. So it can get a bit OTT in that sense that, oh, I'm not going to eat now, I'm going to wait for 30 minutes. But if you leave the gym and you feel sick and you just like brain dead because you just had an intense workout, you're probably best waiting until you don't feel like that to eat. But it's all around eating when your body's receptive to eating. If you make it very easy to digest the food, your waist is not going to blow out. And then going more towards assisted athletes, but this does carry over to naturals as well. One of the things that ruins people's waists when it comes to drugs with things like insulin is wrong combinations of foods with the drugs. So There's one coach in particular that he's got quite big in the UK now, and I see him doing it every time, and he's ruined some blokes' waists already.
Oh, really?
And I'll tell you afterwards, but I don't get how no one's questioning this. It's doing insulin pre-workout with high fats,
Oh, right.
like making people eat muffins and donuts pre-workout with insulin. It's just like visceral fat galore. So yeah, do that over a certain period of time. Anything that's in your blood when insulin's present is going to get stored. Now,
Sure.
the issue with fat is fat gets synthesized into how your body wants to store it. So carbs, it gets broken down and shuttled away.
Yeah.
Right. Protein, again, gets broken down to their free form, and they just stick to whatever they need. So I know if some part of you needs leucine, it's going to go there. If it needs valine, it's going to go there. Fats, you break down to their free form triglycerides, and then your body actually resynthesizes them. So this is where you get differences in like white fat or brown fat. It's because your body chooses how to synthesize them. This takes time. Force fat into storage instantly, visceral fat, essentially. So visceral fat is a nightmare to get rid of. You can be shredded and have visceral fat.
Yeah.
It's an absolute nightmare to get rid of. There's certain things you can do, like fasting, to try and get rid of it, but it takes a while. It takes a long time, and it's obviously not the healthiest thing to have either.
Sure.
So one combinations of drugs can do that. Again, when things like talking about inflammation in the stomach, when things like growth hormone come into account, people use it throughout the day. They'll do like 3 shots a day. Anything that's inflamed in your body, when IGF-1 is present, IGF is going to bind, it scavenges for inflammation, it scavenges for damaged cells, regardless of where that is. So in a workout, fantastic. We're damaging our muscle, it's inflamed. IGF-1 is going to scavenge for damaged cells, bind there, activate satellite cells around it. Happy days is what we want. What happens when we've just had a massive meal and we've got IGF-1 in our body and our stomach's struggling to digest it because we're really pushing the food?
Yeah, it's gonna bind onto that bloating effect.
and combined with higher blood sugar, so reduced gastric emptying time, because you're doing growth hormone 3 times a day by this point.
Yeah.
How do you combat high blood sugar? Oh, let's do some slow acting insulin. Oh, so this means now we're going to have even more conversion to IGF-1, because IGF-1 is what you get when growth hormone and insulin are opposing hormones. They get converted together into the liver to create IGF-1. So now you're forcing food down that's not clearing as quick, and you've got really high amounts of IGF-1 and inflammation in your stomach. It's just going to grow.
Yeah.
So that's a way. Again, if you avoid doing stuff like that, I prefer using it tactically, let's just say. Again, not a lot of people see it as beneficial doing that, but the people I'm primarily focused around care about having a small waist. I don't necessarily I don't coach any mass monsters, let's say, that just care about just getting huge. There's a time and a place for that, but if someone's doing classic, or again, someone like, a female competitor like yourself, chances are you don't just care about looking like a fridge.
No.
There's aesthetics at play. So I use it a lot more around times when it will have the least effect on anywhere else other than where we want it to.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back onto the nutrient partitioning element, just because I know there's going to be a lot of people who do ask these questions. And guys, if you do still want to ask the question afterwards, then obviously just put it underneath the YouTube comment thing, and then we'll obviously get back to you. But would you actually approach, nutritionally wise, would you change the approach based on gender, so male or female, or would the approach still stay the same?
Men can handle more carbs, because we've got more testosterone. Testosterone plays a massive role in glucose load in itself. Women, because they've got high estrogen in a muscle building context, can have a more bias for storing intramuscular fat as well. So whilst on one hand you've got more of an argument to have higher carbs in men than women, I think they balance out because, again, go too high with fats in women as well, you do risk more, especially with their sisters, you do risk more intramuscular fat storage as well. Generally, it just means women just need less carbs in general.
Yeah.
That's not a huge amount. You can still put girls on like huge amount of carbs, but it won't be the same as a bloke at the same weight, let's say.
Yeah.
Unless, again, there's hormonal assistance there.
For sure. And
Yeah.
that's the thing with women, we've got that many hormones, you know, it's not just one that we've got to look out for like men, they just have testosterone. Women, however, we've got lots of different hormones that we need to take care of. So yeah, you cannot just treat women in the same light as men, and women are just not little men, which a lot of people do unfortunately tarnish.
And there's an argument with women as well to have like a cyclical approach in terms of food according to your cycle.
Mm.
Hormones elevating, lowering, stuff like that. But to be honest, I'm perfectly honest, I know when I don't know something, I don't know enough about that. And from discussions I've had with people who do, the general consensus that we agree to is the benefits aren't absolutely incredible to warrant having a completely different diet throughout the month all the time. So it can just overcomplicate things, basically.
I totally agree. I literally have. I mean, I do a lot of work with women, obviously, as you can imagine, but sometimes their cycle impacts their strength levels and impacts their energy. So I do have a different approach with some people, not every single one, because some people, they can have like superhuman powers the week before they actually bleed. Others, they just turn into like batshit crazy people who can't fucking think straight in the morning. So I use different approaches for them based around their cycle. But again, I'm not being funny as well. Somebody who literally just says in the first month of coaching, right, we're going to do this around your cycle, is a fucking idiot, because you need to be able to get to know your client as well. And if that's going to take a few months, because every cycle is different as well. So one cycle you can put on a crap load of water weight and you can be really hormonal and really tetchy. But then the next month you won't even notice it creep up on you. You know, so you've got to be able to know your client before you start pissing around with different foods or approaches in and around a training cycle to coincide with the menstrual cycle. You know, it's a bit of a different one. And all this thing, have you heard of seed cycling?
No.
Yeah, so this is a weird one, right? So basically, you can use different forms of seed, as in like pumpkin seed and linseed and all of these kind of malarkeys, to coincide with your cycle.
Oh,
Yeah, I
okay.
know, bit of an odd one. I mean, there are different forms of fats, and the different seeds carry different kind of fats as well, so you store them in a different way. But it's not going to have that much of an impact when it comes to your menstrual cycle. So I thought, again, that's a little bit more of a clickbaity one. Really.
It's one of those things. There's probably a study somewhere that supports it, but the benefits probably so minuscule that it doesn't really matter.
It's just
Yeah.
one of those, isn't it? Absolutely. So I know that obviously we are coming up on time here. God, I can't even bloody talk, can I today? Honestly. But what is the one thing that grinds your gears in the industry at the moment based around nutrition in bodybuilding?
So the most common one that annoys me, and this is more that I see people coming to me that show me what they've done previously or someone's had them do. I would say the number one thing is around force feeding or eating when the body's not able to eat, because it will destroy your digestion over time.
Yeah.
The stomach's like anything else. Oh, my dog's going absolutely mental.
People are aware of this, that kind of thing happens. I'm surprised my dog hasn't gone mad today.
It's just the postman. I'll just wait for him to stop and then we can just cut this out or something.
Nah, I'm gonna keep it in. I'm gonna keep it in. It's great.
Yeah. Right, so
Force feeding.
Force feeding. Everything in your body over time gets worn out, right? It's aging. How fast that happens, depends on how much stress it's going to be under. If your stomach is consistently under stress and inflamed, it's going to wear out a lot quicker than someone who's maybe a bit more careful.
For sure.
To the point I've seen clients come to me now with scarring on their esophagus because of chronic leaky gut syndrome, which we don't know what that is. It's basically acid reflux, but it's just the part of the esophagus where it meets the stomach. It's got a valve there. It's some of the acid escaping that, basically burning it over time. So I'd say that's one of the main things. That's my number one pet peeve, would be around force feeding in general. It's the standard old school bro approach of, it's a lot of food, but just eat it, just deal with it. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
Term. You know, there's a time limit to how long you can get away with things. And some guys, yes, I don't know, they can just get away with force feeding and eating whatever. But once you've got to that point in an off season where you're waking up at like 3 o'clock in the morning to throw up, and you can't keep anything down, and you're struggling as a big bloke to eat like 3,000 calories, you need to ask yourself, you know, is this what I should be doing?
Absolutely. I agree with that side of things. Good God. Right. Okay. So I think that is all of the subjects. We kind of covered that very well, I think. You know,
it's pretty quick. Yes. I'm surprised I didn't waffle longer than I did. So
no, you do tend to waffle.
I do.
You do. It's all right though. It's cool. So that is it for this episode. Oh no, I didn't ask you the question. So I ask everybody on this podcast a question. I always put them on the spot, and I know that you haven't listened to any episodes, so this is going to embarrass you even more so, which is hilarious. If you could choose 3 people, living or dead, to sit down and have dinner with, who would it be and why?
God. 3 people, living or dead.
Yeah.
Right. I'm going to get hate for this. Donald Trump.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh God, this is a difficult one. Who would I?
Told you. Always puts everybody on the back foot.
It's bad that Donald Trump's the first one that came to me.
Little bit.
God, this I'm not doing too well here. Donald Trump, I would say the lead singer of Tool.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Stephen James.
Yeah.
And I don't know who the last one is. Maybe my dad. My dad would be a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd have a grown-up conversation with my dad. That'd be good.
That's always a nice one. Mine's my mom. So my mom's always included in that table, which is always a nice one. Right, guys, so that is it for another episode of Don't Fear the Wait. Thank you so much, Phil, for coming on board. I will put all of the details, so if anybody wants to contact Phil for coaching, then obviously please just hit him up. Like I said, I'll just put all of his details underneath the YouTube video, but if not, you can find him on Instagram. I think he is the only Phil Soumakis that is out there, realistically.
There's one other one in Canada who plays hockey.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
There's not a lot of people with my surname.
No, it's an odd one, isn't it? It's like I'm the only Vicky Masita out there. It's weird. But yeah, so obviously go and follow the bodybuilder Phil Soumakis, not the hockey player from Canada, because that would be, well, I mean, you can go and follow him. I'm not saying don't. That's really nasty, but you know, it's not this Phil. Anyway, I'm gonna go before I start yabbering on again. Thank you so much, guys. Obviously, as per usual, give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a share, give us a tag, and I will see you on the next episode. See you later.